So a few days ago I released a video about something that Kotaku editor Jason Schreier tweeted about the Knights of the Old Republic series. The video was titled EA isn't letting Bioware make new Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic games, and it highlighted this particular tweet posted on January 18th in which Jason had this to say regarding a KOTOR sequel. They have tried to make it happen more than once from what I've heard, no luck. This was posted apropos of tweets detailing how EA might have paved the way for some of the less ideal circumstances surrounding the Star Wars license. Now, it would turn out that the off-the-cuff tweet gained a lot more traction than he had anticipated, with various news outlets picking it up as a story with headlines that read along the lines of EA won't let BioWare make more KOTOR games. My video came a few days later on January 22nd, and its headline was also along the same lines. In the video, after I showed Jason's tweet and emphasized that Jason himself doesn't provide specific details on why BioWare has had no luck with their multiple attempts to develop a new KOTOR game, I broke away to discuss my own speculations, which was that EA was probably not too keen on greenlighting the project, given the publisher has made it abundantly clear that they are far more interested in pursuing monetizable live services rather than expansive play-once single-player experiences. I also referenced an old article from April 11th, 2017, in which Jason relayed in response to a false rumor that while BioWare Austin had played around with the Knights of the Old Republic prototype, it was ultimately never greenlit and ceased development, which I used as evidence to back the idea that BioWare was very much looking forward to making a proper new entry in the series, while surmising that EA wasn't going to let this happen. I also referenced a more recent article in which Jason made it known that EA CEO Andrew Wilson, who had inherited the Star Wars licensing deal from the previous CEO, wasn't particularly happy with this deal, wanting to focus on their own intellectual properties, and I expressed how the lack of enthusiasm for Star Wars seemed clear from the lack of quality releases, from the numerous cancellations, and from the fact that BioWare's attempt at reviving KOTOR wasn't being greenlit. Now, 2 days after the video was uploaded, Jason Schreier began to notice the numerous headlines centered around this tweet, and he took to Twitter once more to express his disdain over the fact that what he said was even considered news, noting how developers pitch dream projects all the time. And then he proceeded to highlight my video specifically and tweeted the following message. This one is particularly egregious, and I have to call it out because it's not at all what I said. 334,000 views. Immediately, I took to reaching out to him privately to understand the specific qualms he had with the video, and from what I understood, his main qualm was the headline, which he interpreted as me implying that the title was what Jason expressed in his tweet, when the title was actually meant to represent my take on what he tweeted. I didn't twist Jason's words in the video, I read them word for word, and I made sure I emphasized that no specific details were provided on why BioWare has had no luck reviving KOTOR before I delved into my own speculations. But most noteworthy of all was a response Jason provided to a Twitter user contemplating what a new KOTOR sequel from BioWare could be like, with Jason's response reading as follows: "They've tried to make it happen more than once from what I've heard. No luck." While Jason didn't provide exact details on why BioWare's attempts haven't yielded any desirable results, it's certainly not crazy to assume that this has in large part to do with EA's reluctance on greenlighting the project. However, that doesn't change the fact that the headline itself was a rather poor one, as it declared something that was more speculative than anything else, not to mention that the speculation itself was way too narrow in its view. When I reached out to Jason, something that I asked him was for additional details he could provide that could clarify the headlines that cropped up from his tweet, a statement through which he could extrapolate what exactly he meant. Word for word, here is the response that he provided. KOTOR 3 is a dream game for a whole lot of people, and I don't think it's much of a shocker to say that some of those people work at BioWare. What I've heard is that different BioWare staffers have taken multiple stabs at KOTOR 3 over the past few years. In some cases, that might have been a couple of BioWare's leads making a PowerPoint presentation, and in other cases it might have been a few devs in Austin building a prototype during some downtime just to see what they could come up with. I don't know how many times it's happened, just that it's happened more than once. And that, as far as I know, those pitches have not been greenlit for production. What to make of this then? It's easy to conclude that EA is run by greedy executives who wouldn't let the devs at Bioware do what they wanted to do, as you assumed in your original video, but consider a few other hypothetical possibilities. Perhaps the pitches and prototypes just weren't that great. Perhaps the pitches and prototypes fizzled out like many other pitches and prototypes do. Most game studios are constantly coming up with new ideas and dream projects that never go anywhere. Perhaps Bioware found itself unable to divert resources for new projects because it had to bring on as many people as possible for Dragon Age Inquisition, and then Mass Effect Andromeda, and then Anthem, since all those games were on fire at various points like all big games are, and needed all hands on deck. Perhaps EA studio politics got in the way, and executives at another EA studio took issue with the idea of Bioware making a Star Wars game when that studio had its own ambitious Star Wars games to worry about. Perhaps all of EA's executives and studio heads disagreed about the best approach for Star Wars, and at the end of the day only one person in the room could win the argument. Perhaps EA's leadership isn't interested in single-player RPGs anymore. Perhaps Bioware's leadership wanted to focus on its own IP rather than having to work with yet another outside party in Disney Lucasfilm, which might require a very difficult and time-consuming approval process that not everyone wants to deal with. Perhaps both EA's and Bioware's leadership really wanted to make KOTOR 3, but Disney Lucasfilm didn't. Perhaps Bioware thought they could make a good enough KOTOR 3 for $100 million, but EA executives said, hey, we'll give you $50 million, and then they were at an impasse. Perhaps EA's executives said, well, okay, but what's your version of FIFA's Ultimate Team? And Bioware couldn't come up with a good enough answer. Perhaps both EA and Bioware are waiting for a better time. My point is, there are a lot of possible reasons that these projects might have fallen through. Oftentimes, it's a combination of several of them. I don't know exactly what's happened with KOTOR 3 pitches over the years, and I don't know exactly why they've failed, but I do know that the explanation is never as simple as EA bad. EA might be run by money-hungry executives, like all publicly traded companies are, but there might be a million reasons that everyone's dream game never comes to fruition. The answer is usually a combination of lots of those reasons, not just one. So, all we know for a fact right now is that Bioware had put together prototypes and maybe some PowerPoint presentations for a new KOTOR game, but they never got far for reasons that not even Jason truly knows. All the bullet points he provided are a range of speculative possibilities based on information we currently know. Among the bullet points are speculations that I myself provided, including that EA leadership wasn't interested in a single-player game and are simply refusing to let Bioware make a new KOTOR game. But the point that Jason's trying to make here is that there could be any number of reasons on both EA and Bioware's front, and that the truth is likely a combination of multiple factors. I felt this was good information worth putting out there for future reference, which brings us to my making this video to relay this insight. Attributing Bioware not being able to get KOTOR off the ground solely to EA barring them from the IP is premature when we don't have all the information, when a number of other things could have gotten in the way. That's not to say there isn't the possibility that EA executives are mainly to blame. There are certainly things we can glean from the way EA has been handling the Star Wars IP so poorly, but it is admittedly too early to create headlines based on that. So hopefully this helps clarify things a little and puts greater context to Jason's brief tweet that came to be misconstrued. Now, one thing I regret is that Jason didn't just contact me first before going out of his way to drag my name through the mud. We have established a direct line after our last discussion, so had he reached out to me privately and expressed his qualms with the video, I would have been happy to take it down and make the appropriate corrections, and we could have done this without the hostility that is bound to instigate between two communities. I feel like this same result could have been achieved without pitting people against one another and without creating the notion that a confrontation is brewing or whatever. I'd understand if I had failed to respond to his qualms with the video, if I had been ignoring him or something, but I was never reached out to directly in the first place or given a chance to make the appropriate corrections before Jason resorted to this knee-jerk reaction of calling me out specifically, which I don't feel was ultimately constructive. At the same time, I have blame to bear in that I didn't reach out to Jason for further clarification about his brief Bioware tweet. Had I reached out to him and inquired for further elaboration and insight before releasing the video, this whole ordeal could have been avoided, so that is totally my bad. Fortunately, we did ultimately concur through private messaging that we'd keep each other in the loop more. Should I publish a video pertaining to one of his tweets or articles and something isn't clear, I'll reach out to ensure all information is in order, and Jason has agreed that should he have a qualm with something I've presented related to his work, he'd reach out so I can have an opportunity to make things right and hopefully avoid situations that will devolve in communities hurling insults at each other. So, all in all, hopefully the information provided in this video will prove satisfactory, and hopefully we can all just move forward, and I'll certainly do my best to be more mindful of avoiding speculative headlines moving forward. I'm only human, so I'm bound to make mistakes, but I can certainly say that I'll strive to take responsibility for them the best I can, and I'll certainly try my hardest to avoid mistakes in the future. Though, being human, I'm bound to slip up at some point. And when that happens, I'd welcome being reached out to and being called out, and I'd welcome learning from my mistakes. That's all I have to say. I just want this to resolve amicably, rather than turn into something dramatic. So hopefully this clarification and extrapolation helped in that regard for all parties. With that, I will see you guys next time. Yong out!